Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. This is episode 39. Jamie Eads joining you as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. We certainly do appreciate it. Have a really good interview for you today. We will be joined in just a moment by Uli Salazar. Uli serves as the marketing and artist relations manager for Ludwig drums. He's going to stop by and talk to us all about all things Ludwig, so you're not going to want to miss that. So please stay tuned for this message from Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. Los Cabos works hard to ensure they leave the world a better place than how they found it. In addition to their work with the FSC, which helps to prevent deforestation and manage environmental risks, Los Cabos Drumsticks also partners with many local and international nonprofit organizations, including Breast Cancer Can Stick It Foundation and the Canadian Cancer Society. To get involved, look for a Los Cabos pink dipped drumstick at your local music instrument retailer. With 3 different models to choose from and a portion of all proceeds going to support cancer research to find a cure, you might just find your new favorite drumstick. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, going to be joined by Uli Salazar here in just a moment. Uli, of course, works as the marketing and artist relations manager for Ludwig drums. He just has one of the coolest jobs in the drum industry, and he took some time out of his busy schedule up in Chicago to stop by and talk with us about his history and career as a drummer and how he ended up at Ludwig drums. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Uli Salazar. Uli, how's it going this afternoon, brother?
Good, man. How you doing?
Man, I am doing well. How is life up in Chicago today?
No complaints, man. It's a sunny day in October, 84, if you can believe that, in October. Surprisingly enough, I've noticed October over the last several years experiences more rain than we do all spring. So we're thankful for sunny days in October when we get them.
Well, absolutely. Now, okay, I've got to ask right off the bat, are you a Sox or a Cubs guy?
Southsider, man. White Sox all the
way. Okay, well, so I was getting ready to make the joke about October and Cubs baseball, but, you know, that joke kind of went away a couple of years ago. Yep. You know, they finally hung a banner out at Wrigley, but the bass player in my band is a Southsider, and he would rather die than root for the Cubs. So
I'm the same way, through and through. I mean, it's great they won a championship, but yeah, I really couldn't care less.
Absolutely. You Southside guys are anti-Cubbies. So
we're brutal, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Well, thanks for taking some time to come on the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it. I think this is going to be a fantastic hang. And what we typically do, Uli, is, we kind of go back to the beginning. Tell our audience how you got into music and drumming to begin with.
Totally. My earliest memory of music comes from my dad. He had an extensive record collection as a kid, and there was constantly always music playing, and something sort of connected with me in just the constant presence of music, and mostly really drawn to rhythm. My family sort of noticed early on that, my body would sort of move to everything, and I would dance a lot. So they're like, hey, maybe he's going to be a dancer. Like, definitely not. You're growing up with older brothers. They were sort of a good influence and sort of guide to things that would essentially get me to drumming over the years. They took up guitar as kids and sort of introduced me to drummer friends of theirs that they played with in bands, and sort of being up close to that instrument finally after hearing it on a record all these years, to sort of experience it in person. I'd say about fifth grade or so, that really drew me into sort of what I needed, what I really wanted to do and explore, and that was drumming. So at about fifth grade or so, I finally dedicated to an instrument, which ended up being the drums. I started off on piano early on as a kid, and but always had that same appreciation for music that my dad and my brothers had. My dad's not a musician, but being an avid fan of music and bands and going to concerts and things like that, we sort of just inherited that same sort of bug and appreciation. And luckily mine ended up taking me to just committing my life to drums. So no complaints there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, did you know after picking up the instrument that you were going to dedicate your life to drumming, or were you a sports guy? I mean, did you, I guess, walk us through that progression of how you ultimately ended up at Ludwig, I guess?
Well, it's a long story, and to answer the question early on, I really didn't have a direction or a defined plan of this is the route I'm going to go, this is what I'm going to do. I just sort of knew I wanted music and drums a part of my life at any capacity. But yeah, growing up in Chicago, obviously massive sports fan. You got the Bulls. I was around when they got all 6 championships in the 90s. So that was a big deal. Exciting times to be in Chicago with some very incredible championship teams there.
Indeed.
But yeah, go ahead.
I just said indeed. That team was a force to be reckoned with. But so
without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But, I guess what I'm driving at, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but what I'm driving at, you said you wanted to keep it in your life. So did you do, marching in high school or concert bands, things like that?
Yeah. So at about 6th grade or so, I got my first drum set after playing all of my brother's friends' kids for about a year or so. I finally got my own kit, and some self-taught. My parents weren't the biggest, or at the time my parents were split, so I lived with my mom in her house. So she wasn't at all a fan of me playing drums, and so she didn't. she wasn't gonna go out of her way to get lessons for me, and she was just kind of hoping for that itch to die. And she'd be like, "Oh, he'll get over it, and I don't have to listen to that racket all day long."
Of course.
So yeah, she wasn't trying to influence that in any way, but nonetheless, music kept me really inspired, and so I would just play along to records for years and years up until I got to high school, and that's where I finally took up music in a more sort of formal setting and learned an array of percussion instruments there, and I also ended up picking up trumpet for whatever reason. I was just always attracted to that instrument and that sound, and wanted to sort of just expand my knowledge and understanding of music through getting into another instrument, things like that. So ended up picking up reading music through trumpet and percussion ensembles and band and things like that. And yeah, just pretty much went through high school in music to some capacity, whether I was playing trumpet or drums, but I did play drums a ton outside of school. I was always in and out of bands of all sorts. Anybody that needed a drummer, I was willing and ready to play. So, and after school, my regiment was put on whatever record I was obsessed with at the time and try to master it from front to back.
Yeah, so many of us went down that rabbit hole, just playing along with your favorite records. Who were some of the influences you had?
Early on, there was a lot of classic rock influence, obviously, from my dad, and my earliest memory of music was The Clash, and The Clash were a really important band for me, even to this day. I think there was something very interesting and unique that I was able to sort of finally pick apart and dissect the older I got with Topper's drumming in that band, in that setting. In high school, I listened, sort of followed suit to more sort of angry punk rock music. And towards the end of that, got more into hip hop, and from hip hop, sort of dug into Motown, as a lot of those breakbeats were sort of sampled from early soul music and R&B and things like that. And so sort of got into more concentrated, more focused sort of drumming with Booker T and the MGs and things like that, and a lot of stuff on Stax and Motown. But yeah, it definitely never sort of stuck to a genre. And I was glad that sort of my taste started to develop, and my excitement for music and just having that bug to explore it more and more sort of grew. So I really got to expose myself to a lot of music by the time I graduated high school, which was pretty excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it makes you a very well-rounded musician if you don't just dive into one single genre and live there for the rest of your life.
Totally.
You know, and you mentioned, you know, Stax and, you know, the great stuff that came out of Memphis at that time, and Motown, and you know, you said you were getting into hip hop and some of those break beats were sampled from there. I find it really interesting that you get to work with Questlove, you know, pretty much on a day-to-day basis now, who is the master of that stuff. I mean, that's got to be a thrill for a kid from Chicago, right?
Totally. It's kind of unreal, because that was my introduction to hip hop. I dated a girl in high school whose brother was an MC, and they had, she let me borrow the record, Do You Want More? She's like, yeah, you should really dig into this. Like, Questlove, the drummer in this band, like, I think you could really connect, because she knew I was a drummer. You know, she was like, you could really connect with this record, I think. Give it a shot. And yeah, that's sort of where it all started. There was no looking back after that. And there was a very deep obsession with that group and Questlove, and crazy all these years later that, like, I'm helping design kits for him and whatnot. So
yeah,
it's pretty well.
Just unreal. I mean, what an awesome story. So, you know, obviously you said you were playing drums in a lot of bands around Chicago, you know, as you became an adult. Did you chase it as an artist for quite some time before you got over to the manufacturing and marketing side, or did they both kind of happen at the same time?
Not really. Sort of went through several steps and goals, I guess, over the years. The thing that sort of always kept me in music was, I wasn't playing in a band. I got into music retail just outside of high school and college, working at Guitar Center, and just sort of putting myself through college and school, and sort of, you know, obviously with the importance of, like, being, you know, the end goal to be financially stable and responsible and whatnot. I was sort of chasing a career that led to that, in almost in a guaranteed way. I understood, you know, very early on, music is definitely a big risk to make it and to be successful and continue to thrive, as many of us know. And I guess I never had all that confidence in myself, or had a lack of confidence that I could really push myself and discipline myself to really do that. And I felt that it was a really big risk, and also pressure from parents and whatnot. So I was like, well, I'm going to go a more traditional route and pursue a degree in psychology and see where that takes me. That seemed like more of a sure bet. So I did that, but while outside of that process, I was in music retail. So that sort of kept my one foot in and one foot out in the world of music. And so obviously being a music retail, I still pursued playing in bands, had the ability to acquire and buy gear at great discounts from being an employee.
Sure.
So I would hoard gear and take it apart and figure out how things worked and why, and just wanted to learn more. And I found myself sort of continuing to apply myself more to understanding the form and function of the instrument that I play. As much as I obsessed over playing and learning how to develop as a player, sort of started wanting to know more about the instrument and what it is and why it does what it does, and how much further it can go, that sort of thing. And towards the junior year of my run in college, I decided to take a break and go into woodworking. And I went to woodworking school here in Chicago for a few years and studied furniture making, which was sort of my introduction to many of the tools and processes that go into making a drum. The end goal at that point was to figure out how to build my very first drum, and got to learn how to sort of craft and apply those skills to that purpose over the years. And that opened up, like having that knowledge of the instrument opened up a ton of opportunity for me. I think one of the biggest things I did outside of music retail was teching for Blue Man Group in Chicago, and I did a little bit of the North American tour as well. That was sort of my first foot in a professional line, sort of servicing the instrument and being at the service of the instrument as opposed to being a player. And doing that and continuing onward sort of continued to open up doors when at any possible opportunity. There was always something there that I could jump into and say, hey, I think I can do this. I'm going to go after it. And met a lot of great people along the way during my time in music retail, and as well with doing a lot of tech work and restoration. So that sort of eventually, long story short, got me to jump in as a member of the Ludwig team early on in 2014. I think it was September 2014 is when it started, or October 2014.
Well, so it's your anniversary month as we speak. So that's pretty cool. Now
4 years this month.
Yeah, for sure. So did you jump right in on the marketing and artist relations side, or were you more on the retail, servicing dealers at first when you started with Ludwig?
I actually started, the position I applied for was artist relations manager, and I got hired on. And about 3 years into having that role, I got promoted to marketing manager. So yeah, very early on, it was very pro artist centric. And through working with artists, it's sort of a natural transition to sort of collaborate on projects, with influencer marketing initiatives and things like that. And I helped launch the Pocket Kit, which was the children's set that Questlove designed, and helped finalize a lot of those designs with him and his team and bring that to market. So a lot of sort of being thrown into that world from already sort of dealing with the artists and things like that introduced me to an area of interest that I never thought I had with marketing and sort of developing a story and telling that story and communicating it and putting together a strategy for a product release. To me, that sort of put me back in the wheelhouse of being creative. I think one of the things that I thrive on, and many musicians do, is a creative process, crafting something from the ground up and then seeing the final result. I sort of got that same fulfillment out of making drums. You take a piece of bare material and turn it into something that's playable and has got a really great look. And I sort of felt that was what I was doing with a lot of the marketing and project and product releases that we were doing at Ludwig. And it was sort of an unexpected, satisfaction for me to do that. But it was great because I felt like it always sort of continued to fulfill that creative bug in me. It was just sort of a different application, but all sort of intertwined and related with music, which I'm very fortunate it sort of taken that shape.
Absolutely. Well, and what a palette you have to work with. I mean, Ludwig is, it just goes without saying, it is the company of Bonham. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that. And Ludwig's been around for over 100 years. So, I mean, you had all of that history, to I guess, fall back on, Ringo and, as I said, John Bonham and, at one time, Charlie Watts, Buddy Rich, just everybody that all of us drummers, hope to emulate and idolize have all been on the Ludwig roster at one time or another. So, as the young guy coming in artist relations and marketing, 4 years ago, I know the history of Ludwig, obviously, but I mean, what kind of pressure was that like to come into a company like Ludwig and be in charge of, that artist roster?
It was pretty intimidating. I mean, I felt like in the industry there really wasn't a lot of individuals in my sort of my age bracket at the time. Several guys a little bit older than myself, but it was definitely very, very intimidating because you definitely had the bulk of the industry were pretty well seasoned vets that have been in the industry for decades. So that was very intimidating early on. I knew my stuff. I mean, I obsessed over it for years, especially the history of this particular brand. Being from Chicago, I had a very strong affinity to the Ludwig brand and product, as that stuff was made in my backyard. Growing up in Chicago, especially in the 90s, there was always a big sense of pride of being in the city and being a part of this city, and I'd say probably a lot of that comes from sports, from Bulls,
Sure.
Chicago Bulls and things like that. But for me, the more I got into music and sort of understanding the bands that came out of Chicago as well, there was always a very strong pride that I had for the city that I was from, and I was very fortunate to be from this town. So I really dove into the Ludwig story and the legacy at a very early age and sort of obsessed about it and really started to network and talk to people in the industry and peers that were older than me to sort of know more and dig further into that story. And I think people sort of having recognized that excitement and appreciation for the brand, I think it sort of helped me position myself in a role where, as I mentioned, it was very intimidating very early on, just being as young as I am. But I think people sort of knew that I had the knowledge and the information and the appreciation and the respect for this brand in my pocket all the time, and that definitely helped me sort of come out of that sort of nervous shell of like, oh man, I think people don't really recognize that I know what I'm doing, or maybe people see me as some young chump just trying to figure it out. But I wasn't at the same time.
For sure. Well, one of the things that Ludwig has, I think, been very successful with from a marketing perspective, when I was a young drummer 30 years ago, Ludwig was very much out of favor. You didn't see Ludwig kits on MTV. That was all the rage at the time. You just didn't see Ludwig as a rock and roll instrument anymore. And, that was kind of shortly after operations, manufacturing operations had moved down to Monroe. And I think Ludwig's flagship at the time was kind of like the Ludwig Rockers, that was what was being pushed from a marketing standpoint. And then somewhere in the 90s, I think there was this rebirth and burgeoning vintage drum craze, and back then they were just called used drums. And, everybody started wanting to get a Ringo kit or get a Bonham kit. And the only thing that was there that was like that was Ludwig. And I think Ludwig capitalized on that, and the quality of the instrument came back to where it had once been. So, I'm not trying to put words into anybody's mouth at Ludwig, but that's just kind of my perception through my lens. Speak to that a little bit. Yeah,
well, I mean, Ludwig has gone obviously with a long history as we have. I think any company sort of experiences ups and downs. I think our biggest challenge around that time was you had a lot of offshore brands coming in with a lot of innovative ideas at a price that we couldn't really touch. I mean, if you look back at the 80s, there was a lot of American companies that were practically out of business at that point, or on the verge of going out of business. And many of them were, I guess, saved through being purchased by other companies and whatnot. But there's very little of those original American brands left. That, I think really the only thriving ones or consistent companies right now are ourselves and Gretsch. But the company was still being one of the few USA companies, drum companies, that does orchestral and marching and drum set percussion. I think that has always worked to our advantage and why we've continued to stay relevant all these years. And I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to obviously, yes, our history and classic drummers, but I think during the 90s, a lot of the things that continued to sort of keep Ludwig moving forward was the fact that we were one of those brands that was your one-stop shop for all things percussion. And really at the time, I mean, the people that were running the show were doing an incredible job. I just think that we were sort of, there was a much bigger light sort of shown down onto competitor brands and things like that. So it really pressured us to sort of reinvent and reimagine our approach to sort of continue to move forward as a contemporary brand and as a relevant brand. And they've done an incredible job. So sort of being able to carry on that torch and try to move it forward is a very big honor to be a part of the team to do that. But I think lucky that we have the great history that we do with many great, well-known and recognized and admired drummers. But I think at the same time, there's no denying the extent to our product catalog and the quality of it. I think that sound, that Ludwig sound, the good thing is it's very well recognized till this day because it's been captured on so many records over the years. And people started to sort of recognize that we make drums out of the same machinery that we did all those years later. Not much changes. So we've captured a lot of the same aesthetic and design and sort of mojo from our drums of the past. And, thankfully all those drums lasted decades and decades and decades to continue to remind people, especially from the vintage market, that Ludwig is still around and still relevant.
Absolutely. Well, and you said a mouthful there. I think it is a testament to the brand that it is the most coveted vintage instrument out there. It is the 60s Ludwig drums. And the brand is just thriving today. I bought a classic maple kit back in, I want to say it was like 2008 or so. I had kind of gotten the vintage bug. I've got a 66 Black Diamond Pearl kit, and I wanted a modern classic maple kit. So I did a special order, and I would put it up against anything. The quality was just fantastic. It was a beautiful kit, sounds great. I do a lot of recording with that kit. I got smaller sizes for kind of coffee house gigs and whatnot, but I do a lot of recording with that kit. And, I think it's a testament to the fact that, yes, there is mojo, and yes, all those recordings. I mean, the Supra, the snare drum is the most recorded snare drum on earth. And that's not just marketing BS. That's the truth.
Yeah.
All of those hit records had a Supra on it. And, they're still made the exact same way. I just recently had John Aldridge on the show, and I just sent, I've got a 6.5 Black Beauty that I sent to him to have engraved. I had always wanted one engraved, and I sent one to John Aldridge. And, a Black Beauty is going to sound like a Black Beauty no matter what era, where it came from. They're the same today as they were 40 years ago, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to beat those drums. You always want to beat those drums.
Exactly.
Sound wise, it's very tough to sort of say no to that particular drum and that sound. It just always seems to work. I mean, you play them, and I've always just felt that's exactly the way drums should sound like. You hit that drum, it does what it needs to do. They're super easy to work with and very consistent at the same time, and they always tend to bring out because they're so rich sounding. I feel like they influence creativity in a far greater way than other instruments that I've ever played before. That's what I've always enjoyed and found special about our particular product and take on drums and our design. Has been modeled quite a bit over the years for good reason, but I think we definitely landed on something that is timeless for sure.
It absolutely is, and no matter how you tune them, they just sound fantastic in a track. They really do. Uli, I want to switch gears just a little bit, and if you will, put on your artist relations hat for just a minute. A lot of folks ask me all the time, I have some relationships with some companies, that I'm very proud of, and I love those relationships that I have, and they support me tremendously in what I do as a player. Talk to us a little bit about, what it takes to become an artist on the Ludwig roster. What are you guys looking for? Because, I get the question all the time, or I hear the comment, I got endorsed by, X drumsticks, whatever the case may be. And I always say, no, you're giving your endorsement to the brand, but a lot of people, I think a lot of young drummers especially, they think that they've made it when they sign that, endorsement deal or artist contract with a company. And that's not really the case. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about how you start a relationship with a company and what you guys are looking for and how that process goes?
Totally. Yeah. And I would say that sort of our story is specific to, or our approach really specific to our brand. I'm sure everybody has their own specific agenda and initiatives that they want to pursue, with sort of even entertaining an endorsement program or endorsement initiatives with artists. For Ludwig, we really look at establishing a continued connection with the drum community. I mean, internally, we're very few people. We're a handful of people, and to sort of know and be there as sort of a resource to up and coming drummers and even pro drummers, it's very difficult for us to sort of be an open line with all of these people. So we really look at endorsers of our product and the brand to sort of be boots on the ground for us and be our conduit to the market and help us communicate what it is that we do, why and how it can be beneficial to many drummers coming up today, whether you're beginner, intermediate level drummer, studio drummer, engineer, what have you. A lot of artists help us tell that story, and the process to becoming an artist sort of varies. I mean, we don't necessarily narrow our scope to all-star drummers, that are playing sold-out stadiums and things like that. We really look at sort of many categories that exist in the music community and sort of existing to some capacity in each pocket so that we can be sort of present as a resource in each one of those areas through an artist of ours. And we hope that many of the artists for us are out there sort of sharing their excitement and passion for our instrument and drumming in general, but specifically what we do as a brand and what it has to offer for many drummers today. The selection process inside, we go through to sort of break it down. We go through an application process for a lot of artists, and we sort of analyze and assess an artist's background and see how a collaboration could help benefit our initiatives internally. And we set out a yearly goal on sort of what we want to do, what we need to accomplish as a brand, and rely on artists to really help us carry out a lot of those initiatives that we have internally as a brand. We're very focused on continuing to sort of bridge the gap between us and the player, and the artist is sort of one of the most convenient ways of sort of mending that gap and establishing them essentially as a liaison for us to the community. And so having a mutual collaboration between an artist and the company is very important. And that's sort of where the bulk of the focus is. I guess that's sort of it in a nutshell.
And I mean, some of the companies that I endorse, I hear the horror stories all the time of the cold email. Hey man, can I get some free stuff? And I'm sure you get those emails too, or texts or whatever. That's not really how this whole thing is supposed to work. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, not necessarily in our industry. I think having access to discounted gear or rental gear and things like that is one of the more common benefits to endorsements these days. I think so many people are used to what endorsements are, I guess, more in a mainstream setting with like LeBron James. I'm sure he gets his headphones for free, his pants for free, his socks for free, his shoes for free. So I think a lot of people see that and they're like, well, that's how things work, right? That's how endorsements work. It's like, well, yeah, when you're LeBron James and you're in the landscape, we're drummers.
There you go.
This is the music business. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Well, that's what I was hoping you would say, because I want to get that out there. Because, I mean, I've had a lot of younger players ask me, how cool is it that you get your cymbals for free? And I'm like, dude, I don't. I mean, that's not how this works. It is a two-way street. It's a relationship that you have with a company, and you're helping to guide people to that brand. And in turn, they'll give you a discount, or if you're playing in Topeka at a last minute notice, they'll get you hooked up with a backline company to make sure you get to use the gear you want to use. Exactly. So I think it's hard for a lot of younger drummers to kind of get their head around that. So I wanted to make sure we at least touched on that while we had you on the show here. One other thing that I'm a little bit curious about, talk to us a little bit about your current artist roster. Of course, everybody knows that Ringo is playing Ludwig and Questlove, and we had Bermuda on the show a while back. He's a longtime Ludwig artist. But it's not all guys that are playing at that level. Tell us about, the kind of volume we're talking about. You've got 300 international artists or so that you're taking care of on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. There's a roster of about 300 worldwide. And, as I mentioned before, our focus isn't necessarily, those drummers playing sold out stadiums. It goes from educators in a classroom to obviously the drummer on the Tonight Show. There's a very wide range of talent, and all of them are great players and do tremendous things. And there's value to what they do. for us, we keep a very limited focus on the roster. We try to keep the quantity to quite a minimum. We like to focus more on the quality of the relationship more than we focus on the quantity. For us, it's about how can we further sort of be available for a lot of collaborative efforts, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's not a one-way street. We're sort of in this together. The artist is endorsing the brand and the brand is endorsing the artist. It's never one or the other, for Ludwig at least. For us, it's about a collaboration. It's about a relationship. It's about an effort as two components, really telling that story. So yeah, you'll find a very wide range of artists, especially today. We obviously have a long list of classic, world-renowned drummers like Buddy Rich and Ringo Starr and Jim Bonham, but many contemporary artists today in many different genres. I think Ludwig was for many years recognized as sort of the rock and roll brand or classic rock band, and sort of understanding the versatility of our product and the capacity of what we could achieve with our product as far as versatility. We attract players of many different styles and backgrounds, and we're excited by drummers of many different styles and backgrounds. We're very much influenced by the community that we service. And at the end of the day, to sum it up, that's drummers. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're a drummer, you're a friend, as far as I'm concerned, and we want to get to know you. We want to know what it is that you do, why you do it, what excites you, and really how our product can fit into that area. And if it doesn't, what could we do to design something that does? The company was founded on servicing drummers. William F. Ludwig I, he invented a pedal to make the drummer's ability to play their instrument much easier. It wasn't about starting up some enterprise company that took over the world. It was mostly, hey, we have this idea. We struggle with it as players ourselves. We know our peers in the industry struggle with it as well. We're going to design a product to have an answer to that. And I think, luckily we haven't strayed away from that one common thing that founded Ludwig all these years later. We continue to try to work towards that goal and that initiative day after day.
Absolutely. Well, and I'll be the first to say, I've gone through, I don't know how many Speed Kings over the years. I've been playing about 30 years. And seriously, I am not joking at all. When the Atlas Pro pedal came out, I was one of the early adopters. I was like, this is a modern pedal that looks like a Speed King. I must have it. You know what I mean? It was just, and it's an incredible piece of gear. And you guys are doing some incredible stuff on the hardware side of the equation. And, I'm heaping praise, but it's well deserved. You guys,
thanks, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you guys have always just had drummers' backs, and as a drummer, I certainly appreciate it. For sure. Uli, I'm going to ask you to put your marketing hat back on now.
All right.
So I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask the question, what can you tell us about NAMM, which is coming up here in just 3 or 4 short months? Anything that you can give us a sneak peek into for Ludwig, or is it too early to give it away?
Well, I could sort of allude to a few things, and next year is going to be a pretty big year for us. It's our 110th anniversary. So there's going to be a lot of celebratory sort of limited edition items that harken back to a lot. You'll find components that harken back to a lot of popular designs and styles of our past. So, I can't go beyond that, but for you vintage collectors and vintage aficionados and fans, there's going to be some really cool stuff to get excited about. And, interestingly enough, a lot of that classic vibe and design and sound, still has an audience with a very young generation now, which is fantastic. So, we've been very fortunate and excited by the reception that we've had on our new sonic line of drums that just came out this year, which is sort of, as classic of a look and sort of feel and vibe as it had. It was one of our more contemporary designs of the last several years. And this year, sort of coming into an anniversary, we're going to celebrate Ludwig. It's a celebration of Ludwig, and we're definitely going to show that with some really exciting limited releases and just standard catalog items too, which would be really cool.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm excited. So basically every drum made next year is going to be a 3-ply shell, right? No.
Yeah.
Uli did not say that. So Jamie said that. Send your letters to, no, I'm kidding. Uli, one of our traditions here on the Drum Shuffle, and I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you coming on, but one of our traditions here is we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice. And this can come from the marketing world. This can come from the artist relations world. It can come from the drum playing world. Just share with us a good piece of advice.
Don't doubt your passion. Trying not, I don't want to sound corny, but don't doubt your passion. I think there was many times that I did coming up over the years, and sort of reflecting on my career, I'm sort of glad that I, as much as I try to give up on it because I felt it was a risk, committing to something that at the end of the day brings you a lot of joy. It's like, no, it's because for me, I'm like a kid working at a toy store,
For sure.
And I never thought that you could craft a career, professional career from it, and raise a family with a career and, talking to drummers and, designing drums and whatnot. But I've been lucky enough to do that. And I think it comes from, not straying too far away from what my passion has been. It's always been drums at any capacity. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's playing, if it's teaching, if it's repairing, if it's, marketing, it's always been drums for me. So no matter what you find to be your passion coming up as a musician or as a drummer or whatever, anything that you do, commit to that passion 110%, and you will learn that you'll benefit from it, and you'll be glad that you did. And I always tell people that, because I had to remind myself that several times, and now looking back, I'm really glad that I did give myself that reminder, sort of stick with it and keep following my passion.
Oh, that's fantastic advice, Uli. Hey man, thanks so much for stopping by the Drum Shuffle. We appreciate it so much. I'm going to go ahead and throw the invite out after everything is announced in January of 19 at NAMM. I would love to have you back to talk about all of the special limited edition releases that Ludwig's going to have. Come back and we'll give you guys an hour to talk about all the cool stuff that's going to be coming out for Ludwig's 110th anniversary.
That'd be great, man. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to chatting again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Uli, have a great evening, sir.
You too, man. Take
care.
All
right, see ya. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for episode 39 of the Drum Shuffle. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. We cannot do what we do over here without everybody tuning in each week. Our heartfelt thanks go out to you. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to listen in. We have some great episodes coming up that you're not going to want to miss. And as always, please keep your emails coming throughout the week. We love hearing from you. The Drum Shuffle Podcast at gmail.com is the address to reach us. Of course, our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. Next week, we're going to be joined by jazz great Bill Stewart. He took some time out of his schedule to call in from his world tour with the jazz legend, John Scofield. So going to have a great conversation with Bill next week, and you're not going to want to miss that. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers.